fun fact. So Kate and Cole started at More Revolution being our directors about 6 months before I met my wife. And one of the things that we talked about, actually, I don't know if this is the time to share the story. Short version of the story, we were going to Switzerland. The three of us plus another team member, Cole's passport was set to expire in like 20, 30 days, and they wouldn't let him fly. In 30 days, wouldn't let him fly. So I ended up speaking for him spontaneously on the trip.
Literally at the airport, they won't let me on. And I turned to Abram and I go, Abram was going to record, to shoot video and to take photographs.
Simple.
I mean, that was it. I turned to Abram and I go, well, looks like you're up. You're going to have to speak all of my spots for me. And he didn't, I mean, I don't know if he was flinching inside. He did not flinch outside. And he just stepped up to the plate and spoke all of those messages, brought truth. It was unbelievable. Okay.
Oh, I pooped myself inside. That's what happened. Yeah, so I'm glad the outside face didn't happen.
Internal poop.
But inside of that, though, over on the other side in Switzerland, they were hosting us, but the people that were supposed to host us, for some reason, a quick oversight was they forgot to get a host, someone to host the team while we're there to like just show us around and take care of us. So they asked one of the girls in their church who had done a BSSM, spoke great English, and said, hey, would you help host the team while they're here? She said, sure, no problem. I was going to help out the conference anyways. There's more story to it later, but that girl is now my wife, who is actually currently babysitting the Zick kids so we can have this conversation.
That's right.
So,
it is a wild ride of love.
It's been incredible. But in that 6 month period, this is how we're going to jump right in. And in that 6 month period, I was 30, 31, single, and my impression was, hey, I'm just going to give all that I have out in front of, like, just give all I have to God and to my work, to building up stuff. And basically was a workaholic. I had taken the serve and went to the extent of that to become a bit of a workaholic and so much. And Cole kind of just confronted me one day. He said, hey, do you realize that the habits that you're forming now in single life are going to carry into your dating life and then ultimately into your marriage? And I was like, well, I had kind of planned on like reworking some stuff once I got there, but then I realized it was very true. And I think that's the way I kind of wanted to kick off today, is just, and that's the point of this whole podcast, is what's the habits and the things that you're forming and you're doing now in your dating life and in your single life that you may not even realize that are actually developing these habits that will carry into your marriage, your future marriage, whether it's with the person you're currently dating or with someone else in the future. Yeah. So I'm going to open it with that, and then I'm going to toss it to you guys and go, hey, what does that look like? What have you seen some people do really well and some people not do as well?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that popped into my head actually is a new thought. I hadn't thought of it before, but as you were phrasing it like that, I was just thinking about the single girls out there who I remember as a single girl, I had learned to live off of the approval of guys, the flattery, the approval, get their attention. Yeah. And if you build that habit, like that doesn't just stop when you put a ring on it, like you'll find yourself hiding your ring so that you can still get it, or really feeding off of and still needing that. If you're so building up on constant approval and whatever your norm is as a female, which honestly we're kind of trained to do, which is really sad. But it's really important to realize those triggers to not do that, because that doesn't just change the day you get married. So that's just a random one that popped in my head while you were sharing that.
Yeah, well, and I think also with that, that's so good. And obviously Caitlin's never hit her ring to get approval, because she gets all the approval she needs from this beautiful sexiness right here. But I think the other thing too is it really is applicable. I want to make this statement. I think a lot of people think marriage will be a reset. Marriage doesn't reset anything. It amplifies what's already there. So once I get married and I am day after day doing life with a human on a closer level and a closer measure than I've ever done before, and with dynamics I've never had before, right? You even think about your dynamics. The dynamics with your parents, it wasn't a mutual submission thing. It was I submit to you. If you have younger siblings, it probably wasn't a mutual submission thing. It was they submit to us. Yet if I'm the older brother, I force my way. I don't know what your scenario is, but whether you're the younger, the older, whether it's parents, you've never probably been in a situation that required such a level of mutual submission. So if you have taken advantage of people before marriage, that habit is going to come into your marriage, and there's going to be an amplified temptation to take advantage of your spouse, and vice versa. So really what you can move into in your single life, your dating life, let's label all of it pre-marriage life, is ultimately I'm working towards how can I become the healthiest whole person that I can be. I want to be the healthiest whole so that once I'm married, the things that are amplified are the fruits of the Spirit, not poor relationship skills. I want the amplification of who I am to be the things I can give to strengthen someone and make them better, as opposed to rip them down. So for guys, I think a lot of us, before we're married, we kind of master the art of manipulation, where we know what to say to get what we want. And we do that a lot. A lot of relationships are built on that. A lot of relationships for guys, because the sex drive becomes so big, the stereotypical narrative that does hold true oftentimes is that we'll say whatever it takes to get to the next base, the next level, whatever that is. The problem with that relational model is that control and manipulation will destroy a marriage. And so pre-marriage, it's not creating depth, even though it maybe feels like it is in the moment. It's giving you a false sense of relationship. Well, in marriage, you can't get a false sense of relationship. It ultimately leads to a volcano explosion of divorce or something worse or something different, rather. So I think ultimately, that we could go item by item by item by item. There's so many things that these early habits are going to be amplified in marriage. But I think these are just the two we would address. Is I would say, hey, look at the way you're managing your relationships. Begin to teach yourself how to honor everyone you come in contact with. Because then once you're married, the honor you're able to give your spouse is going to be amplified. Now that becoming the character and the nature of who you are is your relationship, your marriage is going to abound in honor. There's not going to be control. There's not going to be manipulation. There's not going to be a need to receive validation from somebody's opinion of how you look. All of a sudden, honor starts to dismantle all of those broken relational habits. And honor allows us to actually be in a really safe place together where we can really trust.
Yeah. Great.
I mean, we could go, there's so many things we could talk about on this. I think those are probably two of the big ones when it comes to my habits now impact my later.
Wow. Yeah. Those are great. So I want to go back to something, and just maybe we could come up with a few examples just to flesh this out a little bit. You said how we use people. Like what are the ways that then we find ourselves either consciously or unconsciously like using people pre-marriage
You have something to say.
I can vulnerably share some of mine. Before marriage, I really wasn't single. I mean, we got married when we were really young anyway. So we got married when we were like 21, 22.
I picked her out of high school. We went to senior prom together.
Yeah, we went to senior prom together. But before that, even in my times where I was single or didn't have like a committed boyfriend, I was always finding some other guy to meet my needs. And so it was a very bad habit that as a young girl, it was totally subconscious. I didn't know it, but I didn't learn to strengthen my female friendships. I learned to lean on a guy to fill and meet. Then really, I didn't then have very strong female friendships that then when I get married, it's like, oh, I have this great support system of friends over here. It's like, no, I had just like used guys as my friends. I think a lot of times, and for years, I've spoken to girls being a youth pastor too, where it's like, we learn how to believe that female friendships are catty and it's not like they're backstabbing. It's easier to be friends with guys, all of the lies. And so we don't learn how to have healthy female friendships, which we need to help us have a healthy marriage. You need to also have healthy friendships. You can't be like everything here. But I hadn't learned that. And I think it's really important to learn, because I think girls, for some reason, were so much willing to go there with a guy, whether it's a boyfriend or just a guy friend, rather than really being vulnerable and opening up our lives to other females and learning how to have healthy female friendships.
That's really good. I think probably the most common way Sorry, did you want to say something on that, Abram?
No, I thought that was great. I was just affirming that was an excellent point. I love, this is something Kate's great at, and I think she even does well in her book, shameless plug for Kate's book, is basically championing other women, like breaking down those stereotypes of like you said, that catty has to be against each other. It's like, no, real women support women, and like better together, the whole idea. So I love that. Carry on. Cole, you go.
All right, I'm going to call out probably every single person watching right now. I'm not doing it on
Watch
purpose,
it.
but if the shoe fits, you got to wear it. I would say probably one of the main ways that seems really discreet and is under the surface way of controlling and manipulating people is giving a compliment that you don't really mean, because subconsciously you realize it's going to give you favor with that person. You know, and I think that's something that people do often without realizing that we're doing it, where we are saying something or stroking somebody's ego, or the Bible calls it false flattery, where we don't actually mean what we're saying, but we realize this is going to have a favorable result. And that might even be a subconscious thing. Now, hear me. I'm not saying don't encourage or don't tell people when they're doing good. It's super important that we just naturally are encouraging people that are giving life with our words, right? Absolutely have to be giving life with our words. At the same time, I don't want to use my encouraging words to falsely flatter so that I can ultimately get an end result in this relationship that I would like. So I think that's one of the really common ways that we don't necessarily always realize that we do.
That's so
good.
good.
Like you had a...
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a way that you can kind of check your heart, so to speak, in that is when you give a compliment and they don't respond the way that you anticipated them to. Because if it's actually out of an overflow of your heart, then like if they take it, they don't take it, you're like, great, I just wanted to encourage you. But when they don't respond the way that you anticipated, then you're kind of like, oh, that did something in here. Why did that do something in here?
That's it. And passive aggressiveness, because that's a lot of people, if we're overly encouraging and it's not real, it's not an authentic, coming from an authentic place, we probably also lean into passive aggression, where somebody does something to me and I act as if it's okay, even though in my heart it's not okay. I mean, that is actually a form of manipulation, because you're trying to stay within good standing with someone because you're scared that if you tell them the truth, they're going to break relationship. These are some of the habits that if you've developed these in your dating and just platonic relationship life, will absolutely wreak havoc on your marriage. Passive aggression in marriage will rip things apart. And even people like me, I'm a very direct person, as you know, Abram. Anybody that knows me, I'm direct.
Very true.
I'm willing to give compliments, but I'm not going to give it if I don't feel it. I'm not just going to say it if I can't actually say it and mean it, right? Like, I feel like I'm an encourager, but
which I love about you.
What's that?
I love that about you, because when you say something, I'm like, oh wow, he actually meant that.
That's right. If it comes out, you know I meant it. But the problem with that in marriage is, even for me, who's a pretty direct person, I found myself at times, it's not worth it. Like, this isn't worth bringing up. She asked me what I think about this. Can I tell her? I don't know if it's worth telling her, because of what telling her is going to create, right? And so we almost have learned this practice of passive aggression so that we can keep the peace in our relationships. And we have to realize keeping the peace is not the same as health. Okay? We're meant to operate from a constant place of peace, but we're not meant to keep the peace in a false manner. We're to be peacemakers, not peace pretenders. So passive aggression pretends that there's peace there when there's not. Peace is, I've been able to communicate fully what's on my heart. You've been able to communicate fully what's on your heart. We've created a safe place to communicate that. We're not passive aggressive. We're not manipulating each other. We're not controlling each other. We're not telling each other good things when we don't mean it. We're making sure to give authentic compliments that build each other.
Uh-oh. Looks like we just lost them. We'll give it a second for them to pop back on. But I just want to, it sounds like he was saying, giving authentic compliments that we actually are able to give to each other. But just to kind of elaborate on that, I love that, because as he was saying, here they're coming back, as he was saying, if you're not actually honest with the other people, in that when you're single and when you're dating, you can kind of keep this some form of like, it's okay because I don't see them all the time. But when I see them all the time, if I haven't actually been honest with them, then essentially I have some form of facade, a mask in front of myself, and I'm not actually being real with them until, and you can't get away from it. Like when you're married, you can't be away. And then eventually that feeling is going to build up and build up and build up inside. So you're either one, never going to honestly connect heart to heart, or two, you're going to blow up at some point because you've kept all this stuff inside and not actually went for it. So I was just sharing this is how it could relate later while you guys reconnected. But you were at the point of saying we can honestly give each other compliments.
Right. So once we've created a safe place of honoring where we're not manipulating, we're not passive aggressive, we're in a healthy way communicating what we feel, that's what a healthy marriage is built on. Yeah. Maybe one of the best things you can do in your single and dating life is develop the right habits and relational action, or interactions and habits in the way you interact with each other that gets rid of manipulation, that gets rid of control, that gets rid of passive aggression, that's clear, healthy communication, that is honest. I can be honest and not damaging and not threatening. Yeah. I think that's the other thing is people say, oh, I'm just honest, I'm just real. Well, you can be honest and real and not be aggressive, abrasive, harsh, and mean as well. I can, in a very clear way, communicate a very deep hurt that I've had with Caitlin without it digging deep in her. If my goal in my heart is to honor her, and I know her goal in her heart is to honor me, then I'm able to communicate hurt and pain without having to attack. Yeah. Right? And these are the habits that we need to be developing in our relationships before marriage so that when we're here, you guys can all have as great of a relationship and marriage as Caitlin and I have had in our 14 years of marriage.
Absolutely. Great marriage, great kids, great sex life, right? That's the goal.
Come on.
Hey, speaking of sex life, let's dive into some physical stuff, because this is the thing.
What took you so long?
Exactly. So how does your physical, let's call it physical pacing, how does your physical pacing of boundaries, how does that and what you do inside of dating, how does that actually carry on into marriage? Even if you get married, like even if you get married with the same person, that maybe the things went a little faster past boundaries, how does that carry on later?
I always let you go first because I would talk forever. So I'm looking at you to go so that you can talk.
Okay. So
can I say one quick thing?
Yes.
I think I read this quote once. It was actually a funny Instagram meme, which I loved. But it said, dating, either you break up or you get married, no big deal. And I was like, wow, that's awesome, you know? But it's true. So basically everybody that you're in relationship with, they're either someone else's spouse or they're a future spouse for they're your future spouse. I think most of the time in the church we've talked about, well, maybe they're not yours, maybe they're not yours, maybe they're not yours. But let's talk about what if they are yours and you actually, because I think that's how we justify it in our head is, well, we could get married, so therefore this is okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
You go first.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
I think
I threw Kate off.
You know, ultimately, I think what you're saying as far as pacing goes is how are we managing our sex drive? How are we taking the right steps of intimacy connection? Is that kind of what you're getting at there with that question?
Yeah, or even, yeah, okay, ditch the word pacing. You say what you want to say. I have ideas we could talk about later, but okay. Skip that part. How does the physical part of dating influence marriage?
Yeah, that's great. I think here's one of I'm going to completely steal a part of Jason Valadin's teaching on this, because I think Jason Valadin gives what I believe to be the single greatest dating talk that I have ever heard in my life. I've heard him. I've probably heard him give it. I couldn't even count how many times. We have a podcast with it, and it's so good. But one of the basic concepts that he teaches when he talks about the trust ladder is that we can't allow our intimacy to grow in a relationship at a faster pace than our trust is growing.
Our physical intimacy.
Okay. So, well, intimacy in general.
Yeah.
So the intimacy can't move up the ladder quicker than trust moves up the ladder. So the problem with a lot of modern relationships is intense makeout on date 2 or date 3, sex by date 4 or date 5 has caused intimacy to go from 0 to 100, whereas we may only be 4 weeks into a relationship. We literally haven't even had time for trust to catch up with the rate that intimacy is being built. Yeah. We're running, we're sprinting after intimacy, or we're sprinting into intimacy so quick that trust is just trying to catch up. And then all of a sudden we went from 0 to 100 in intimacy. And then we have a little bit of a disagreement or an argument, and what happens? We become terrified that all of a sudden we're going to lose this relationship. What's the name of that podcast?
It's how to develop or how to start a relationship, and then it's called the intimacy ladder. But we can post it on our.
Yeah, if you go to YouTube, our YouTube channel, you can see it's me and Jason Valadin talking behind a whiteboard. Or for a whiteboard. It's pretty great. But I think ultimately that's it. When we're talking about the pacing of the way that we manage our dating relationship, it's super critical that we're building trust faster or at the same rate that we're building intimacy. I don't ever want to move my intimacy past my trust level. I want her to be able to fully trust me. Now, ultimately, that's going to lead towards what is the greatest act of trust? A covenant. A covenant makes a powerful statement that you can trust me and I can trust you. I am in covenant with you. This is a blood bond. We're making a blood covenant before the Lord. And if you don't know that, go find the teaching on it from Bill, where he teaches about a blood covenant. Or maybe it's Danny. I don't know. One of the fathers of Bethel has done a powerful teaching on blood covenant. And that's ultimately what marriage is. That's why the hymen breaks. That's why the hymen was meant to break, was so that there would be a blood covenant here. This final act of ultimate trust that says, I am in lifelong covenant to you. You're in lifelong covenant to me. And the way that God designed it, we have built trust, 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 trust. And as the final act of trust, we're going to enter into a covenant before the Lord, our friends, and our family to say, I am only going to be with you for the rest of my life. Now that we're at that level of covenant trust, now is the time to insert the ultimate level of intimacy. The problem is that we're inserting the ultimate level of intimacy long before we've inserted the ultimate level of trust with this covenant blood relationship. And so that's ultimately why obviously scriptures over and over again, that even a hint of sexual immorality is wrong, be the husband of but one wife to leaders. I mean, scripture is all over the place. It's talking about sexual sin, sexual immorality, all that stuff. We could go scripture through scripture through scripture. I would want to put in front of you, for those of you that are navigating your dating and your single life, is this. We have to make sure that we're preparing ourselves for a very, very healthy sex life and connected life in marriage. The Kinsey Institute in Indiana reported that marriages, they did a study and a survey on sex and marriage. Marriages, the average marriage in America doesn't admit to having good sex until year 12. Year 12 of marriage. When the average marriage ends at year 7, that's a tragedy. This next statement isn't psychological, scientific, or study-based. This is my personal belief system based on the conversations and the teaching we've done. I am certain that a big reason that sex is so hard, it's so hard for marriages to get to a place of enjoying sex, is because they have so many bad habits to dismantle in the relational connectedness. They have so many past experiences to get over and find healing in their mind and their heart, so that they can actually relearn how to be connected with each other again. So if you're in the single life, you have the opportunity right now to hit the reset button, to stop where you're at, to start it over and say, you know what, from here on out, I will never build intimacy faster than trust, so that I'm ready for a healthy, connected relationship in marriage.
Yeah, so good.
You're just saying that because you're my wife.
So let me play the devil's advocate here then for a second, because so if the good sex doesn't happen until year 12 of marriage, why should you not just start having sex now, so that when you get married, you actually get to have good sex with your spouse?
I mean, I keep talking. Do you want?
No.
Okay, sorry. I am not the guy that thinks women shouldn't talk. I think women should talk a ton.
We all know that.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I think that's really great. I think because the part of the confusion there is what's good sex, number one. Number two, that mentality comes from the mindset that sex is about performance, not connectedness. So if I'm performance focused, then I think I have to live up to past experiences. I have to live up to porn videos. I have to live up to all the things that we've seen on TV and in movies. I'm thinking about how can I perform at a better level than all of her or my past experiences. That is probably the most unsafe place that a marriage could operate in when it comes to intimacy and sex. And that mindset of, I need to have practiced with a bunch of other people to be ready for her, comes from that mindset that culture has woven in that we're supposed to be performing. When I wanted to be emotionally intimate with her and emotionally connected with her, and that we're wanting to connect both all body, soul, and spirit, what I do now in this moment is I'm not trying to perform, I'm trying to connect. And in that connection, we have found a deep intimacy and a powerful sex life that we both now love it and we both want it often, rather than one of us having to be tortured because one of us is feeling fulfilled, the other one's not, but because we're not connected, neither of us are aware of that. Right?
And you're not living in a fantasy in your head.
Exactly. I'm not living out a fantasy. I'm not asking her to fulfill a fantasy. I'm looking and saying, man, I know you so well. I know what you're comfortable with, what you're not. I know what's going to work. I know what we can move into. I know what we can try. And then all of a sudden, when we're safe, we're connected, man, we're trying all kinds of things. We're doing it all the time. We're experiencing all of this stuff because my emotions are connected to hers. And I think ultimately that's what good sex is. I personally believe that those 12 years for most marriages are 12 years of learning how to connect on an emotional and a mental level so they can actually connect in marriage and they can actually connect in sex. Because they practiced, go back to the very beginning, they practiced control, they practiced manipulation, they practiced passive aggressiveness. They were never in a safe, healthy relationship that they could trust where they stand before marriage. So now they get to married, and they've got all those habits, all those relational habits that have come into play, and they've got to break all of those habits so that both parties can feel safe. Now we both feel safe. Now we've started to enter into a good sex life because we're both connected. And when we're both connected, here's the crux of this, folks. When we're both connected, we're both fully aware of how to fulfill the other person's needs. And it doesn't become solely about me. It becomes about we. In the bed and out of the bed. Okay, I'm sorry I keep talking.
No, don't apologize.
I'm saying everything. I don't mean to.
You don't need to apologize. You're on a flow.
I am.
It's great. Kate, do you want to jump in?
I get distracted by all the questions that are popping up, so I'm thinking about other
No
answers.
offense, but I haven't read any of your questions.
Oh.
I'm looking right at the camera.
Yeah, you've been going.
I think one thing, Kate, that you I've heard you say before is talking about like the gift is actually the experiencing, is the discovering. Can you give us a little snippet of that? Because I think that's one of the greatest things we've experienced so far.
Totally. And so part of it is the idea of what is good sex by year 12 or whatever, like he said. It's all about what's in our head about what good sex would be. Because I think if we just reframe our perspective, good sex could be had on the first night, meaning good sex, because we're redefining prospectively what good sex means, and it means discovering together. So there's been times very recently even where we're discovering new things together. And the
quarantine has been a time of discovery. Thank you, Jesus.
But honestly, it's been a perspective shift. Like so it's not like this only happens in your first year of marriage or on your honeymoon, or it happens throughout 14 years of marriage, and I'm sure beyond, where we tried something new and then I was feeling disappointed because I'm like, oh man, it didn't end the way I hoped, or it didn't. But it's like, that's all about perspective. And Cole helped me. He's like, we just did something new. Like, that's part of the gift, is the discovery. And then you like laugh about it. You have fun. You realize, wow, that was amazing. We just did something new and that was fun. So from the beginning till the end, it's like the gift of discovering together and not having to perform. So it's about connection. It's about the joy of trying new things. It's about communication and saying, I liked that, I didn't like that. And then it's about like for me, so the whole beginning of this question, if you're also just tuning in, is the idea of like our sexual histories and how they affect our marriage. For me, if I had a sexual history before I ever met Cole, and that impacted my marriage and took me years so that I could have good sex in marriage to overcome and to reframe my perspective and to heal and to go to therapy and release trauma in my brain around sex. So I think that's what stops us from having good sex, or just simply the perspective of what we see on TV or what we see in porn and what we've been like inundated with in culture, as understanding that building intimacy is discovering step by step together. It's not performing and having some fireworks that we imagine it must be. The fireworks can be, we just did something fun and new together. Like, that's it. That could be the firework that time. And you just keep building and growing together. Yeah.
Love it. Great, babe.
This is so,
you're the best.
So excellent. 2 questions. I'll let you pick which direction you want to go in. If you're seriously dating, engaged in that area, so you're pretty sure you're going to end up with this person, what's then okay, what's not okay, and how does that change stuff later? Or we're getting a lot of questions about physical, like, emotional and spiritual intimacy and the development of that, which for a longer note, I can already let you know it's on the intimacy ladder. So there's a lot that Jason covers in there. We'll link to later, but if you want to speak to either of those.
That's our answer for the emotional and spiritual one. Go to the intimacy ladder, watch that podcast with Jason.
Okay.
Boom, there's our
Great.
answer. For
What was the first question?
Like when we're engaged and you know you're going to be married, is it okay to then cross a few more lines, or do you wait till you're married?
I will never forget Cole saying to me, he said, I wish it was like a ladder and it's like you get to do step to step, because he goes, when we got married, he's like, we just went from not being able to do anything to like everything's on the board. He's like, I wish this was like a step-by-step process. So
It's true.
Because honestly,
right after I got married, my mom had asked me, will you come and speak on purity to my small group in our youth group? And I go, Mom, I'm not at the right place. You don't want me to go speak on that. My sex life sucks right now, and I'm not sure that I'm the right guy to talk about that, because I'm not going to say very good things.
So, I mean, our advice would be no, like, there's not like a progression of like, we might get married, so now you can touch my boobs. Like, it doesn't progress like that.
She just said boobs.
I said boobs, but you know, it doesn't, there is no progression there. Physically, I don't think there's like, and now we can cross this line because you might put a ring on it.
Well, and here's the deal. We both waited till we were married to have sex. We never had oral sex together, but we did cross some lines. We did some touching, way too passionate of making out. You know, there were lines that we crossed that we look back, we're like, gosh, we wish we wouldn't have crossed those lines, right? Like, we shouldn't have went to those places. And we get married. We're 5 or 6 years into marriage. We're going to counseling to address some things in our sex life. And one of the first things that came up in the counseling was that Caitlin had a trust issue with me that she didn't realize she had, because I allowed us to cross those lines. And even in our relationship, she actually, because of her past, she was the one that initiated crossing those lines. She's the one that pushed for those lines to be crossed. And I said no at first, but ultimately I let it happen. And then we both went through a period where we were crossing lines pretty often, way too passionate of making out. Like I said, we were doing touching. There was just a lot. There was things. We didn't do all the things that everybody would consider really bad, so people would look at it and say, that's not a big deal. But we knew in our own heart that it wasn't where we were supposed to be living, where we were supposed to be operating. 5 years into marriage, we're actually going through counseling, and I'm having to look at her and apologize to her for breaking the trust in our relationship, where I was supposed to guard and protect us, and I didn't do that. And at 19 years old, wasn't even conscious of, wait a sec, this may have a repercussion on our marriage. Why? Because God designed sexual intimacy for marriage. So when it's done outside of marriage, even if this is the person I'm going to marry, there are likely going to be repercussions that we're going to have to address and allow the Lord to bring healing to, which was the case for us, and which is the case for many, many, many Christian couples that we talk to and that we counsel and that we love on, because they're not sure, wait a sec, why does this pre-marriage action impact my current marriage, even though that was the person I'm with? Well, it's all about timing. You guys have to hear this. We all know that God is a God of timing. So he will bless one action in this season, and he doesn't bless the same exact action in another season. Now, we can understand that in the realm of when we're walking out our destiny. For some reason, some of us have disconnected that in our relational life. God will bless the same exact action in marriage that he doesn't bless just a month before the wedding day. Why? Because he's waiting for that next level, that last layer of ultimate trust to be built, of covenant. And now he says, now you're ready for full intimacy. Now I'm going to bless every level of intimacy in your life. So an action I wouldn't have blessed a week ago, I'm going to fully bless now. And it's actually going to, not just am I fully going to bless it, I'm going to use it to maximize connectivity, relationship, and intimacy.
Wow.
Another huge thing that I've seen in couples
so
and friends of ours talk to, or even ourselves, is they maybe before they were married, they, even if they didn't go all the way, they just messed around, they did some things, and they're like, or you're having a lot of sex before marriage, and then you get married and you're like, the sex was so good before and now it's like hard and it sucks. You're like, how could that be? I think there's lots of different reasons. Everybody's stories and scenarios are different, but I think a lot of it is attached to the science in our brain about the sneaking and the performance and we're like sneaking off and doing this, or it's like we are performing, honestly, because if you're not married, you're still performing, because you're like, is this going to keep this person? Am I, like, you're in it for all the wrong reasons. And so there's so much adrenaline and different hormones going off because you're not married, that then when it's like all okay and it's all allowed and you're married, you're like, oh, I don't have that drive to do it like that anymore, or we're not sneaking. Like, I've had so many friends who've had like, we had sex before and it was so exhilarating, and now it's like dead and dry. It's like, because
well, it's because you became addicted to the excitement of the wrong rather than becoming connected to the excitement of intimacy. And that's a really dangerous place to operate. You can really do some damage to your future connection if you've allowed your brain to get so dependent on the excitement of what you shouldn't be doing. Now, all of a sudden, when you can do it, your brain has built the wrong habit, and you're more addicted to the sneaky, you know, it's the thrill of the excitement.
The naughty side, yeah.
It was so fun to sneak out at midnight when my parents were asleep, right? Like, and I would climb out the window. I would go and run town at 1 a.m, and it was exhilarating at 12 years old. At 36, walking out of my house at dark at 1 a.m. sounds like misery, because I'm just going to be tired tomorrow. Now I'm actually able to do it. Why is it no longer appealing? Because it no longer has the thrill. And so you don't want to build the habit where your sexual intimacy is connected to doing something wrong, because then when it's right, you're going to have to rebuild the habit. No, it's yes. Abram's
I love.
no.
Oh yeah, I love moments like that where I'm just like, Selah, like just let it sit there for a second. We're closing up here on time, but since we're in the vein of all these physical stuff, how then would you go about setting healthy physical boundaries while dating that are in the right season, but that aren't like too religious? Because sometimes they try to demonize your sex drive, and other times everything's okay. How do you set healthy boundaries that are not religious but still appropriate?
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know how to finish that sentence.
No, we get what you're saying.
We know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Honestly, sometimes what we see is there's such a fear of being legalistic that we stop living in obedience. So it's so important that we don't let the fear of, oh, that's too religious and that's too legalistic and that's too rigid, I don't need to like actually draw a line. I can just go with the spirit. Like, I can just be free. It's like, then we don't live obedient lives where God says, like, actually the verse I had from earlier when we were talking was thinking of Hebrews 13, where it says, honor marriage and guard the sacredness of sexual intimacy between wife and husband. Simple. then it says God draws a firm line against casual and illicit sex. And so God draws a firm line. We draw firm lines. We need to draw firm lines. It's not religious. It's not legalistic. It's living in obedience. It's living up to the identity of who I am and who I'm called to be, and not succumbing to what I think feels good or what everybody else is doing, what's normal, what seems right, because I do trust him. Like, part of the trusting, I'm like, gosh, I can see as my broken femaleness being like, well, I have so much trust, so I'm going to raise my intimacy level. It's like, no, wait. That trust and that intimacy is supposed to be after the wedding day when you get to that whole spot. But it's so important to draw the lines. And if you don't, the simplest thing that we've probably all heard, if you plan to fail, or if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Like, if you don't make a plan, you're going to do the opposite. Like, if I don't have a line, then we're going to do it all because there's no line. So it's so important to communicate. It's a great way to build communication in your relationship, to say, what are you comfortable with? What am I comfortable with? But then, like, what do we think the Bible says? What do we think God says? What do our leaders or our mentors in our lives say? And what do they speak into? Some of it I think is like really obvious and given, but we are not used to being restricted. We don't like being restricted.
We hate it. We have, especially in the U.S., we were built on running away from restriction. I mean, our nation was founded on leaving restriction. So that is without a doubt in our DNA.
And it's just not worth it. It's not worth crossing a line. The wait is so beautiful. The wait is part of the treasure at the end of just like, oh, this was so worth the wait. It really, really is.
Now, so let me give some practical. Let's give some practicals. Here's some of the things we did
when
we were
I was going to say.
So here's the let me just, before we get it, here's the ultimate goal. Be holy as he who called you is holy. That's his instruction to us. So that's my ultimate goal. My goal is to be holy. And because I'm in relationship with her, my goal is to guard her holiness. And I'm definitely not going to infringe on her holiness, right? So because he's given us this instruction. So all of my decisions are being made with that perspective. Am I making decisions to be holy as he who called me is holy? So when we started dating, we started looking at our moments and making our parameters based on that. Here's a really easy one that I would recommend to everybody. There needs to be somebody in your life that you're accountable to. I know that we hate that word. I've talked to someone, I'm not accountable. You know, I should love the Lord so much, I don't need an accountability partner. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. You should, but you don't. Okay? So let's just acknowledge for a second that we all need relationship to actually live up to the call of being holy as he who called us is holy. And it's not an infringement or an indictment on our love for him.
We do have a podcast of both of us talking about accountability as a couple. So if you are in a current dating relationship, I highly recommend. There's a blog for it and a podcast, Accountability as a Couple.
It's great, babe. So I think that's a big thing. You know, when we were, the last 9 months of our dating, we did really well actually leading into marriage for our engagement and then going into marriage, because our accountability partners were actually the pastor and his wife that we were interning under. I think that's the thing with accountability. Don't find the easy out. Find the person that you have a high level of respect for, that when you tell them, they're actually going to be a little bit disappointed. Now, you want it to be somebody that's gracious, that's loving, that you trust, that you know is going to show you the heart of God. But it's got to be somebody that isn't just a peer, right? Like peer-to-peer accountability tends to just kind of be, I failed, you failed, we all failed, why don't we go eat worms? Or, hey, it's okay, everybody fails, there's grace for that, no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. The cross just happens to be a bigger deal. So I need someone that's going to bring me the right perspective. And most of the time, that's somebody that's got more wisdom than I do. So I'm not going to make the statement, it's not a big deal. I'm going to make the statement, the cross and Jesus happened to be a bigger deal. So, yes, I failed. I need someone to come and say, yeah, you screwed up. But here's the power of the cross. Here's the power of grace. Let's remove shame and let's figure out how to go and sin no more. And that's what a powerful, strong accountability partner does. And I think ultimately in that, you're going to, with the person you're dating and with that accountability partner, you're going to set up your own parameters. For us, we realized we literally should not be together after 10 o'clock at night.
We had to have a curfew. And it's really okay to be responsible and create your own curfews. And that doesn't mean that you're weak, that you don't love God enough, that you can't withstand temptation. It just means that you're wise. And we need to chase after wisdom. Like Carrie talked about last week, like wisdom is our best friend. And wisdom, we want wisdom driving the car with us. We want the wisdom of God, and wisdom is a curfew, and it's about creating environments. So it might not even just be about a time of day or time of night. It might be, we won't go to, when we were dating, he had a condo by himself. So we would never go be in the condo alone. Like, I'm not going to do something in like the park when we're walking on or sitting on a park bench that I'm going to do alone in this condo. So it can just be a lot of environment based. And
I just jump in here for a second and just call a whole bunch of people out, because here's what we do in dating relationships. Here's what I've heard young people do more times than I can count. College age students, young adults. Well, my house is just so loud. Starbucks is so loud. We come up with 100 different reasons why we're justifying why we have to be in that really quiet, private, dark spot just together. Let me just tell you, you are more resourceful in how to get a cup of coffee than how you are to guard your purity half the time, folks. So just because you have all of these other things in this environment doesn't mean you can't still find a way to connect on a relational level without being alone in that dangerous scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to guard the situations and the places that we're at, and that's why we set up that curfew for us. It wasn't even about being late. It was just, I don't want to be in a spot where it's one-on-one and it's dark. If that's the only thing that is good, if that's the only way for us to build intimacy, well, we're gonna have to figure something else out, because I'm not willing to build intimacy at the risk of my purity.
Yeah.
Most of us have found ourselves where we're willing to lay our purity down at the altar of trying to build connection. We have to realize we can build connection without having to sacrifice our purity if we just get as creative as we are when we're trying to find a cup of coffee in the morning when we're out of it at our house. Or it's like on a missions trip. Think about on a missions trip. Somehow people always find coffee no matter where they're at in the world. They're so resourceful, right? So let's just be as resourceful about our holiness and our purity as we are about finding coffee on a missions trip, and we are going to prepare ourselves for healthy marriages.
And I love what you guys are saying there, because what you're saying is it's not a religious thing. It's actually it's that wisdom. It's like let's push it. Let's push to find a way. When we were dating, God said basically, He's like, hey, look, you pay the price now or you pay the price later. Later has interest. Which would you like to do? And so you do the hard thing. You sit outside in the cold when your roommates are loud. You get up, you go to bed early, you kick the other person out. And I love what Kate was saying, is like, it's not religious and it's wisdom, because that's the person you want to marry. You don't want a person who takes the easy route. You want a person to go, hey, I'm going to fight for you even when I want something different, because I value you more. So when we get married, even though I want a certain thing, I'm going to fight because I want what's best for you later. We're about out of time, and Instagram's going to cut us off. Final thoughts.
You go, babe.
Well, I was just going to say the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. And I not only want to chase after having self-control in my own life, but I want to know that the person I'm marrying has the ability to fight for self-control. So that's a red flag. If they don't have self-control and they can't protect me, they can't protect us, they can't follow their words and do what they say they're going to do. Then
if they play video games until 3 a.m,
those got kicked out. It was Hebrews 13. Hebrews 13 in the Message translation.
And if you're dating somebody, could I just recommend like easy conversation starters? If you don't know how to say it in person, shoot them a text. Be like, hey, I watched this thing today. Send them this video. Or just go, hey, can we revisit physical boundaries? Like, easy way just to open it up, and then just start with where you are and going, hey, I think we need to talk about this. You don't need to have a right answer. Just bring up the conversation and start talking it out, and then know the conviction inside of you so that you're not manipulated by the other person. Because, sorry, I just thought of this. Cole, earlier when you were talking about the intimacy ladder and how we skyrocket to intimacy before trust gets there, it causes that anxiety and that chaos. And when we're afraid to lose them, essentially we lose ourselves between here and here because we're trying to catch back to them. That's when we make compromises. That's when we lose our values. That's when we say, well, that's okay. That's fine here. So like really getting apart and then just going to that person and going, hey, can we talk about this? Can we reset?
Yeah, it's never too late to reset. It's never too late to reset. It might be harder, but it's never too late.
That's right.
Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Jesus loves you. So do we. Thank you for following MR. And it is worth the wait. And you got this. You got this. You got this.